So again, here we are at National Air and Space Museum. This is so big, I might just have to.
If you don't have a bag, go to this side.
Got it.
Walk in. No bags, please. Walk
I
in.
might just have to make 2 videos for this, but probably not. I'll probably try to get it all in one video, so let's get started. Right now we're waiting for the tour or whatever, so I'll just pause it now. Well, here it is. National Air and Space Museum. This is cool. Whoa. This is awesome. This is awesome.
That yellow one's still wrong about it.
Dude, check out that one to that thing.
It's a simulator. It's a stuffed brownie, but
Some simulator. It's cool. It's some simulator. Cool.
right there.
It's a simulator right behind us. Hey, look, it's the X-Men jet. It's the X-Men jet from Transformers and X-Men. Awesome. We need to call Wolverine. He lost his plane.
Okay, that's fine.
We need to call Wolverine. He lost his plane. Oh man, that's funny. We need to call the X-Men. They lost their plane.
Quite a few. You guys interested in that?
It was also in Transformers.
Well, you know, first let me welcome you to the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center of the National Air and Space Museum. My name is Bob Goldman. I'll be your tour guide for this morning's tour. You know, I don't want to be sexist, but we've got all boys in this group. Would you guys like to focus on military aircraft?
Yes! Military!
Okay.
And X-Men.
For the hour, that's what we'll focus on.
What?
We'll do some
That's the
other
X-Men
stuff,
plane.
but we'll make it a focus on military aircraft. And we'll start off with this airplane behind us. This is the SR-71 Blackbird. And I understand some of you took a tour of the Pentagon yesterday.
Yes, we
They
did.
showed you photos of the
They did.
SR-71.
They have like a little model.
The scale models of it. Okay, what is the real one? This is the world's fastest manned air-breathing airplane ever. It flies at Mach 3. Does anybody know what Mach 3 means?
Is it close to the speed of sound?
3 times the speed of sound.
Yes. I knew it
Put
was
that
something
into
related.
miles per hour, 2,200 miles per hour. How fast is that? If I stood here with a high-powered rifle, pointed at a target, as I squeeze the trigger, this guy flies by, he gets there before the bullet.
Whoa.
It's faster than a high-powered rifle bullet.
That's fast.
That's fast. When the Air Force decided to donate this airplane to the museum, they said, let's see if we can set the world speed record from Los Angeles, California to Washington, D.C. How many of you have ever flown coast to coast? Or you guys are in Atlanta, that would be fine to Atlanta, yeah. How long does it take usually? Anybody remember?
8 hours.
Well, it kind of seems that long, I'm sure. If you're flying from the west to the east, you've got the jet stream behind you, so you got a tailwind. And if you only count the flying time, on a good day, you could probably do it in about 4.5 hours. So this guy takes off from Beale Air Force Base in California, gets out over the Pacific, fuels up, kicks in the afterburners, flies over the marker at Los Angeles, California, crosses the country at 2,200 miles an hour, and crosses the marker at Washington, D.C. Total elapsed time, 1 hour, 4 minutes, 20 seconds.
Wow.
You guys didn't get out of Georgia when you left, did you? In an hour and 20 minutes. So, an hour and 4 minutes. So it's really fast. When an airplane flies that fast, it gets hot. Average skin temperature, 600 degrees Fahrenheit. What does metal do when it gets hot?
It melts.
Well, it could melt, but this is a titanium alloy. It won't melt. Expands. That's the key question. Yes, it expands. See how the airplane's made? A bunch of these panels all riveted together.
Yeah.
Well, in order to provide for the expansion, they're not tight. And so here's what happens. The airplane gets ready to take off and a fuel truck pulls up. Now in most airplanes, inside the fuel tank, they have something called a fuel bladder. The bladder is made out of a neoprene rubber substance. Well, if the rubber was sitting against the 600-degree skin, then what would it do? Melt, absolutely. So they can't have a fuel bladder in there. What they have is nothing. The fuel just sloshes against the skin of the airplane. And the fuel tank goes from here all the way down the back.
Wow, that's a lot of fuel.
Huge fuel tank. So they start pumping in fuel, but it's not tight. So what happens? It leaks out. Lots of fuel leaking out.
That's why it needs a huge fuel tank, because it leaks out.
Well, it leaks out when it's cold.
Oh.
Only when it's cool. So you might say, gee, I hope no one's smoking within several hundred yards of the airplane. Not to worry. The airplane burns something called JP7 fuel. It has such a high combustion point, you could use it to put out fires. That's what you could do. So they get enough fuel into it, because more's going in, it's coming out. They get out over the ocean. They get up to 2,200 miles an hour. It gets hot. The skin then expands. It seals the tanks. And then they slow down, and they meet up with 2 tanker airplanes. And the tanker airplanes then complete the fueling operation. It's cooling down, so there's a little leakage, but not much. And then it's on its way. Because it's going so fast, it burns fuel at a very high rate. About every 2 to 2.5 hours on its flight path, it has to meet up with 2 more tanker airplanes. Some of the flights lasted over 12 hours. So all along the flight path, they've posted these fuel tanking airplanes. That's what they do. It's very expensive to do that. Air Force ran an economic study and said for every hour this airplane flies, it costs the United States government $85,000.
Wow.
And for that reason, they retired the entire fleet. At the end, they had, I think, 16 operational aircraft, and all the 16 are museum pieces today.
Cool.
Well, what did it do? It carried no guns, no missiles, no rockets, no bombs. Its entire payload was right here.
Spy
What did it
plane.
carry there, do you think?
Spy camera.
Cameras, yeah, and an occasional electronic intercept equipment. So, do we still have a need for strategic reconnaissance? That's what SR stands for. Yes.
Yes.
And what do we use today?
UAV, drones, and satellites.
Perfect. Drones and satellites. Absolutely. Anybody have any questions on this aircraft?
No.
I have one.
Yes.
If it's going that fast and it's the fastest aircraft, how do the refueling things keep up with it?
Oh, yes. It slows down.
I didn't know if it could go slow. How slow
It can.
Yeah, it goes really slow, and then the fuel tankers get up and catch up with it.
Okay.
And because when it's going slow, it starts cooling down. That's
It's
why there's
faster.
even a little bit of leakage when it's in air being refueled. But it's still much hotter than on the ground.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
So the front was the pilot, but what was the back one?
Ah, very good. Great question. Front's the pilot. Who sits back here?
The guy who's looking at the, camera.
The camera guy.
Yeah, it's called the RSO, Reconnaissance Systems Officer. He was the navigator and the guy who operated the cameras. Yeah.
I thought that's all.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
If the plane gets up to 600 degrees when it's going super fast, what happens to the pilot? I mean,
Another great question. What happens to the pilot? He can't sit there in 600-degree temperature, can he? The pilots wear spacesuits. Yes, they're covered from head to toe in spacesuits. And they're very uncomfortable. One of the guys who does what I do, gives these tours here, is a former SR-71 pilot.
Wow.
And he tells us that after every flight, they lose 5 to 6 pounds. Yeah, it's a great reducing thing. Yeah. Yes, sir.
how does it fuel in midair?
How does it fuel in midair? It slows down. It's got a little place up in front. You can't see it. It's on the top up there. And the refueling airplane gets in front of it, and it puts out a long hose. And the hose has a little nozzle in it, and they actually have to maneuver so the little hose goes, the nozzle goes into the opening on the front of the airplane, and then they pump the fuel in. Yeah.
So it's just a two-man aircraft. How about this rather odd airplane?
First of all, the reason it looks much different than any other airplane in the museum, which just seems to all be restored and looking like it did when it came off the factory floor, this one was sitting out in a kind of a storage area in suburban Maryland, and we had a horrible snowstorm about 5 years ago. And it came down, I think we had 18 inches, maybe more. Came on the roof of this old storage building, and the storage building collapsed. So they had to do something with this. So they hauled it out, put it in the museum, stuck it together, and said, well, this is the way it looks today. We won't do anything to restore it. So this is kind of an unrestored airplane. But it's the ME-163 Comet, and it's a very interesting airplane. You can see what country flew it. Nazi Germany. Yeah. In the summer of 1944, almost everybody in the world realized the Germans were going to lose the war. But one guy wouldn't believe it, and he was the guy in charge of Germany. Who am I talking about?
Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler, yeah. And what Hitler said is, I've got these really good engineers, and they're building some really smart weapons for me. As a matter of fact, they're wonder weapons. And the word in German for wonder weapons is Wunderwaffen. He said, with my Wunderwaffen, we can still win the war. This is a Wunderwaffen. It's a rocket-propelled airplane. And because they built it in 1944, and the Germans didn't have access to many materials, you know what this airplane's made out of? Wood. It's a wooden airplane. A wooden rocket-propelled airplane.
That's cool.
And here was the plan. They were going to take these little airplanes, put a bunch of them by the factories that still remained in Germany, and when the Allied bombers came over, they were going to send these airplanes up. They would go so fast, they'd go right by the fighters that were protecting the bombers, and then get inside where the bombers were, shoot down the bombers, and then come on back. But they only had fuel for 8 minutes of powered flight. That's all it could carry. So here's what happened when they started to do it. They would take off as soon as they got word that the Allied bombers were coming. They zoomed right past the fighters, and then you know what? They zoomed right past the bombers. Well, that wasn't very good. So then they came back and they rethought it. They said, here's what we'll do. We'll get up, we'll take off when the bombers are coming. We'll zoom right past the fighters. Then we'll turn off the engine. Then we'll glide into the bombers. We'll shoot down the bombers. We'll turn the engine on again, and we'll zoom past the fighters and land. Great idea. Well, the Germans had one thing they did really well is they kept great records. So we know exactly what the impact of that plane was. Of all of the ME-163s, they shot down a grand total of 9 bombers during the whole war. Not exactly a game changer, was it?
No.
So this is one of the few survivors. Yes, sir.
So it's a jet.
It's a rocket propelled.
Rocket propelled.
Mm-hmm.
What's up with the really small, tiny
Propeller. The little propeller there turns when it's going in. Over so I can see where I'm doing. Yeah. It turns when it's flying through the air, and as it spins around, it powers the generator for the electricity in the airplane. That's all it does. It's the generator. Yeah. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. Oh, you got some over here.
I got one. See how there's a little notch in it? Is that how it always is, or does it clamp down?
It clamps down. Yeah, I guess it just sort of. I think when they didn't finish the restoration, you can see the whole seat is coming apart. I think that it needed to be restored a little better. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is it a three-gun fighter, or is it a two-gun fighter?
2 guns. There's a little hatch over here that's covering one of the guns. The other gun's on the other side.
What's this?
What's the pipe for?
The long pipe, that's called a pitot tube. P-I-T-O-T, it's a French word. It's what measures the speed of the airplane. So when you look inside on a dial and it shows how fast you're going, this is what measures it. Yeah. Yes?
What's the home food?